Osho, the truth about Bodhidharma, the master like no other. Throughout the evolution of human consciousness, there has never been an enlightened being as extraordinary as Bodhidharma, a rare, unique, and utterly captivating figure. Even George Gurdjieff resembles him in some ways, but only slightly, and not completely. Many enlightened beings have graced this world, but Bodhidharma stands out like Mount Everest. His way of being, his way of living, and his way of expressing truth were entirely distinct, unmatched by anyone else. Even his teacher, the Buddha, could not match Bodhidharma in certain aspects. Surely, even the Buddha would have found it challenging to digest such a man. Bodhidharma traveled from India to China to convey the Buddha's message. Though separated by 1,000 years for Bodhidharma and those like him, there is no barrier of time or space. To Bodhidharma, the Buddha was always present. While there was a 1,000-year gap between the Buddha's nirvana and Bodhidharma's birth, in the realm of truth, no gap existed. In terms of reincarnation, the Buddha had passed 1,000 years before Bodhidharma's birth, but at the core, they were together. Bodhidharma spoke of the Buddha's essence, though in his own unique way. Even the Buddha might have found it peculiar. The Buddha was a learned, refined, and supremely graceful individual. Bodhidharma, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. He was not a man, he was a lion. He did not speak words but roared. He was rough, lacking the grace of Gautama Buddha. He was not polished like a sparkling diamond. He was freshly emerged from the quarry, raw and unpolished. That was Bodhidharma's beauty. The Buddha possessed a subtle, elegant beauty, while Bodhidharma's beauty was like that of a boulder, strong, solid, and enduring. The Buddha also radiated strength, but it was a quiet strength, like a whisper or a cool breeze. Bodhidharma, however, was a storm, a thunderclap. The Buddha gently approaches your door, doesn't even knock, and you might not even notice his footsteps. But when Bodhidharma arrives, he shakes the very foundation of your house. The Buddha would not wake you even if you were asleep. Bodhidharma, he would raise you from the grave. He would hammer away like a mason. His manner of expression was different from the Buddha's, but his message was identical. He bowed before the Buddha as his master. He never said, "This is my message," but always declared, "This is the message of the Buddha. I am merely the messenger. I own nothing because I am nothing. I am but an empty reed chosen by the Buddha to become a flute. They sing. I am merely the instrument through which they sing." Bodhidharma, a timeless journey into spiritual awakening. Born 14 centuries ago, Bodhidharma was the son of the king of the Pallava dynasty, a powerful empire in southern India. He was the third prince, but after observing everything around him with his extraordinary intelligence, he decided to renounce the palace life. He was not against the world but was unwilling to waste his time on trivial pursuits. All he desired was to understand the essence of his being, for without this understanding, one must inevitably face death. In reality, all seekers of truth are confronting death. Bertrand Russell once stated that if there were no death, there would be no religion. There is some truth to this assertion, while I do not entirely agree, because religion is a vast continent encompassing more than just death, such as the quest for blessings, truth, and the meaning of life. Russell was right in saying that without death, very few people would concern themselves with religion. Death is a great motivator. Upon renouncing the palace, Bodhidharma said to his father, "If you cannot save me from death, then do not try to stop me. Let me seek something beyond death." Those were beautiful days, especially in the East. The king pondered for a moment and replied, "I will not stop you because I cannot stop death from coming to you. Go, and my blessings are with you. It is sorrowful, but that is my burden, my attachment. I had hoped you would be my successor, the emperor of a mighty Pallava, but you have chosen something far greater. As your father, how can I stop you? And you have posed your question so simply, a way I had never considered. If you can save me from death, I will remain in the palace, but if you cannot, then do not hold me back. This reveals the stature of Bodhidharma, a man of unparalleled intelligence. The second point I wish for you to remember is that, although Bodhidharma was a Buddhist, in some respects he transcended even Gautama Buddha. For instance, Gautama Buddha was hesitant to initiate women into monastic life, but Bodhidharma received initiation from an enlightened woman named Pragyatara. She is scarcely remembered today, but thanks to Bodhidharma, her name still survives. Though only her name, as little else is known about her. It was she who instructed Bodhidharma to go to China. Buddhism had already been present in China for 6 centuries before Bodhidharma arrived. Something miraculous occurred, something unprecedented in time and place. The Buddha's message immediately captured the hearts of the Chinese people. At the time, the Chinese had grown weary under the influence of Confucian philosophy. Confucius was merely a moralist, strict in ethics, and dismissive of the inner mysteries of life. In fact, he denied the existence of anything internal. To him, everything was external, to be refined, polished, cultivated, and made as beautiful as possible. Besides Confucius, there were Laozi, Zhuangzi, and Liezi, but they were not teachers in the traditional sense. They were mystics. They could not lead a movement against Confucianism within Chinese society. An invisible pull existed, for no one can live without a soul. Once you deny the existence of the soul, life begins to lose all meaning. The soul is a unifying concept. Without it, one is disconnected from eternal existence. Like a branch severed from a tree, it will inevitably die, cut off from its source of nourishment. Similarly, the thought that there is no soul or consciousness within you separates you from existence. Such a person begins to shrink and feel suffocated. Confucius was a highly rational man. Mystics like Laozi, Zhuangzi, and Liezi understood that Confucius's approach was incomplete, but they were not traditional teachers. They continued their work within small circles of disciples. When Buddhism arrived in China, it immediately resonated with the souls of its people, as if they had been thirsting for centuries. Buddhism descended like a rain cloud, quenching their spiritual thirst on a massive scale. Something unimaginable occurred. Christianity also converted many people, but its conversions were not born of spirituality. Christianity converted the poor, the hungry, the beggars, and the orphans, not through spiritual influence, but by offering food, clothing, shelter, and education. None of these had anything to do with spirituality. Islam, too, converted countless people, but it did so by the sword. Convert to Islam or face death. The choice was yours. Bodhidharma and Emperor Wu, a conversation of awakening. The conversion that took place in China was a uniquely religious process in the entire history of humanity. Buddhism merely explained itself, and the beauty of its message was embraced by the people. They longed for it. They had been waiting for something similar. The entire population, in one of the world's most populous countries, turned to Buddhism. 600 years later, when Bodhidharma arrived in China, there were already 30,000 temples and 2 million Buddhist monks in the country. 2 million monks constituted approximately 5% of China's population at the time. Pragyatara instructed Bodhidharma to go to China because those who had arrived before him had made a tremendous impact, even though none of them were enlightened. They were great scholars, highly disciplined, compassionate, and serene individuals, but none of them had attained enlightenment. Now, China needed another Gautama Buddha. The foundation had already been laid. Bodhidharma was the first enlightened being to set foot in China. What I wish to emphasize is that, while Gautama Buddha hesitated to initiate women into monastic life, Bodhidharma had the courage to receive initiation from an enlightened woman. Many people had achieved enlightenment, but his choice of a woman was deliberate. His purpose was to demonstrate that women could also attain enlightenment. Moreover, the disciples of such a woman could also achieve enlightenment. Bodhidharma's name shines brightly among all the enlightened, second only to Gautama Buddha. There are many legends about this remarkable man, all of which hold a certain meaning. One legend recounts that when Bodhidharma arrived in China, it took 3 years before Emperor Wu personally came to welcome him. The emperor was already well known for his contributions to spreading the teachings of Gautama Buddha. Thousands of scholars had translated Buddhist scriptures from Pali into Chinese, and Emperor Wu had sponsored this monumental effort. He had built thousands of temples and supported thousands of monks. He had devoted his entire kingdom to the service of Gautama Buddha. Naturally, the Buddhist monks who had come before Bodhidharma told Emperor Wu that he had accumulated immense merit and would surely ascend to the heavens as a divine being. It was natural, then, that Emperor Wu's first question to Bodhidharma was, "I have built many temples, supported thousands of scholars, established schools dedicated to the teachings of Gautama Buddha, and offered my entire kingdom and wealth to his service. What reward will I receive for all this?" The emperor was slightly uneasy upon seeing Bodhidharma. He hadn't expected him to look so fierce. With his large eyes and intimidating presence, Bodhidharma could be mistaken for a mafia boss, especially if he had worn sunglasses. Yet, behind that formidable appearance lay a soft heart, like a lotus flower. Bodhidharma's reply was blunt. "No reward. Nothing at all. In fact, be prepared to descend into the 7 hells." The emperor, shocked, asked, "But why? What have I done wrong? I have followed all the instructions given by the monks." Bodhidharma replied, "Unless you listen to your inner voice, no one, neither Buddha nor any mortal, can help you. You have not heard your inner voice. If you had, you wouldn't ask such a foolish question. There are no rewards on Gautama Buddha's path because the desire for reward stems from a greedy mind. The entire teaching of Gautama Buddha is about being desireless. If you perform these so-called noble deeds, building temples, supporting monks, with a mind-seeking reward, you are heading toward hell. If you do these things out of joy, sharing your happiness with others and with no thought of reward, then the act itself is the reward. Otherwise, you have missed its entire meaning." The emperor admitted, "My mind is filled with endless thoughts. I have tried to find peace but cannot. The noise in my head is overwhelming and I cannot hear what you call the inner voice. I know nothing of it." Bodhidharma replied, "Then tomorrow morning at 4 o'clock, come alone to the temple on the mountain. I will help your mind find eternal peace." The emperor thought to himself, "This man is strange and bold. I have met many monks, all of whom were courteous, but this one doesn't care that I'm the emperor of a mighty nation. He even asks me to meet him at 4 in the morning, alone in the dark. He seems dangerous, yet there is a sincerity in him, a truthfulness that cannot be denied." That night the emperor wrestled with his thoughts. Should I go or not? This man might do anything. He's entirely unpredictable. Yet, deep within, the emperor felt that Bodhidharma was no hypocrite. He treated the emperor no differently than a beggar, and the way he spoke, "I will help your mind find eternal peace." It was unlike anything the emperor had ever encountered. Finally, the emperor succumbed to the temptation of Bodhidharma's promise. At 4 o'clock in the morning, while it was still dark, the emperor arrived alone at the temple. Just a few steps ahead, Bodhidharma was waiting for him with a staff in hand. "I knew you would come," Bodhidharma said, "even though you spent the entire night wrestling with indecision. What kind of emperor are you, afraid of a beggar, a monk with nothing but a stick? And with this stick, I will help your mind find eternal peace." The emperor thought, whoever heard of a stick bringing peace to the mind? At most, he could use it to knock me unconscious, silencing my body, not my mind. But now, it's too late to turn back. Bodhidharma continued, "Sit here in the temple courtyard. There is no one around. Close your eyes and I will sit in front of you with my stick. Your task is to catch your mind. Simply close your eyes and look inward to find where your mind is. Once you have caught it, tell me, 'Here it is,' and the stick will do the rest." Bodhidharma, Awakening the Mind and the Journey of Truth. It was indeed a strange experience for anyone seeking truth or peace, but at that moment, Emperor Wu had no other choice. He sat there, eyes tightly shut, fully aware that Bodhidharma would do exactly as he said. The emperor searched for his mind, but there was none to be found. The stick had done its job. For the first time, Emperor Wu found himself in such a situation. The choice was clear. If he found his mind, he couldn't predict what the man with the stick might do. In the serene mountain setting, in the presence of Bodhidharma, a man with unique charisma and unparalleled originality, Emperor Wu felt something transformative. Many had attained enlightenment, but Bodhidharma stood out, towering like Everest. Every action of his was original. Every gesture bore his unique imprint, untouched by convention or imitation. Emperor Wu tried to find his mind, and for the first time, he failed. That was the secret. The mind exists only when you are not searching for it. It exists only when you are unaware of it. But when you search for it, when you become aware of it, that very awareness dissolves it entirely. Hours passed, and the sun rose, bringing a gentle, refreshing breeze. Bodhidharma could see serenity on Emperor Wu's face, a stillness as profound as a statue. Gently shaking him, Bodhidharma asked, "Many hours have passed. Have you found your mind?" The emperor replied, "You didn't need the stick. You've calmed my mind completely. I have no mind, and I've heard the inner voice you spoke of. Now I understand that everything you've said is true. You've transformed me without doing anything. I now see that every action carries its reward within itself. If not, it is better not to act at all. Who is there to reward or punish us? These are childish notions. Who is there to punish me? My actions are both my punishment and my reward. I am the master of my fate." Bodhidharma responded, "You are a rare disciple. I love you. I respect you, not as an emperor, but as someone who had the courage to sit down and bring forth so much awareness and light that the darkness of the mind has completely vanished." Emperor Wu tried to persuade Bodhidharma to come to the palace, but Bodhidharma replied, "The palace is not my place. You know that. I am unpredictable. I do things without knowing beforehand. I live without restraint or plans. I could cause trouble for you, the palace, and your subjects. The palace is not meant for me. Let me live in my natural way." Bodhidharma lived on a mountain called Tai. The second story about Bodhidharma is that he is considered the creator of tea. The word tea itself originates from the name of this mountain because tea was first cultivated there. The method of tea's creation, as attributed to Bodhidharma, is not recorded in history but carries symbolic significance. He meditated through the night, and at times he would fall asleep. To combat his drowsiness and teach his eyes a lesson, he plucked out his eyebrows and threw them onto the temple grounds. Legend has it that tea bushes grew where the eyebrows landed. These were the first tea plants. This explains why tea keeps you awake. Among Buddhists, drinking tea became a habit, as it proved immensely helpful during meditation. Although there were 2 million monks in China, Bodhidharma accepted only 4 disciples. He was exceptionally selective. It took him nearly 9 years to find his first disciple, Huik. For 9 years, a fact corroborated by historical accounts from near Bodhidharma's era, though other details remain obscure. After bidding farewell to Emperor Wu, Bodhidharma sat in meditation facing the wall of the temple. He turned this time into a profound period of meditation. He simply sat, gazing at the wall. When you stare at a wall for a long time, you cannot think. Gradually, like the wall, the screen of your mind also becomes empty. There was a second reason behind Bodhidharma's peculiar behavior. He declared, "Until someone proves themselves worthy of being my disciple, I will not look at anyone." People would sit behind Bodhidharma. It was an unusual situation. No one communicated in this manner. He would speak to the wall while everyone else sat behind him. He refused to turn around, saying, "People sadden me more than the wall. They are no different from a wall. No one understands, and seeing people in such a state deeply pains me. When I look at the wall, there are no questions. It is simply a wall. It cannot listen, so there is no sorrow. I will only turn around if someone demonstrates through action that they are ready to become my disciple." 9 years passed. No one knew what to do or what kind of action would satisfy him. They couldn't find an answer. Then came Huike. He took a sword, severed one of his hands, threw it before Bodhidharma and said, "This is only the beginning. Either you turn around, or my head will fall before you. I am about to sever my head." Bodhidharma turned around and said, "You are truly worthy. There is no need to sever your head. We will need it." This young man, Huike, became Bodhidharma's first disciple. When Bodhidharma was preparing to leave China, he called his 4 disciples together. After Huike, he had accepted 3 more disciples. He asked, "Describe the essence of my teachings in the simplest and most concise way. I will leave this place tomorrow morning to return to the Himalayas, and I wish to choose one of you as my successor." The first disciple said, "Your teaching is about transcending the mind, achieving absolute silence, and allowing everything to unfold naturally." Bodhidharma replied, "You are not wrong, but I am not satisfied. You have grasped my skin." The second disciple said, "Knowing that I do not exist, and that existence alone is the fundamental teaching." Bodhidharma replied, "That is slightly better, but still not enough. You have grasped my bones. Sit down." The third disciple said, "Nothing can be said about it. Words cannot express it." Bodhidharma replied, "Good, but you have already said it. You have contradicted yourself. Sit down. You have grasped my marrow." The fourth disciple, Huike, knelt at Bodhidharma's feet without saying a word, tears streaming down his face. Bodhidharma said, "You have expressed it perfectly. You will be my successor." But that very night, one of the disciples poisoned Bodhidharma in an act of revenge for not being chosen as the successor. Bodhidharma was buried, but 3 years later, a local magistrate reported seeing him leaving China, barefoot and carrying a staff with a shoe hanging from it, heading toward the Himalayas. This magistrate, who had met Bodhidharma many times and admired him despite finding him eccentric, asked, "What is the meaning of this staff and the shoe hanging from it?" Bodhidharma replied, "You will soon find the answer. If you meet my disciples, tell them I am heading to the Himalayas, never to return." The magistrate rushed to the mountain where Bodhidharma had lived and learned that he had been poisoned and buried there. His grave was still intact. The magistrate stationed at the border had no knowledge of this. He exclaimed, "My God, I saw Bodhidharma. There is no mistake. His fierce eyes, his intimidating presence, and most importantly, the staff with the shoe hanging from it. It was him." Curious, the disciples opened the coffin. Inside, all they found was a single shoe. Only then did the magistrate understand why Bodhidharma had said, "You will find the answer. Soon, you will find it." Bodhidharma, vanishing into eternity. We have heard much about the resurrection of Jesus, yet little is spoken of the resurrection of Bodhidharma. Perhaps he had merely fallen into a coma when he was buried and later regained consciousness. Awakening from the grave, he might have quietly slipped away, leaving one shoe behind and hanging the other on his staff, departing exactly as he had intended. Bodhidharma wished to die amidst the eternal ice and snow of the Himalayas. He did not want a tomb, a shrine, or a monument in his honor. He did not wish to leave behind any footprints for people to worship. Those who loved him had to turn inward toward their own being. "I do not need to be worshipped," he had said. And then he vanished into the void. No one knows what became of him or where he passed away. It is said that somewhere, in the timeless expanse of the Himalayan snows, Bodhidharma found his eternal rest.